Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. Alhamdulillah. Salatu wassalam ala Rasulillahi amma ba'd. Come to the third book, Kitab al-Hayd, the book or slash chapter of al-Hayd. And what's meant by al-Hayd, ha ya dad, is the natural blood flow of a woman. The natural blood flow of a woman, whether you say menses, menstruation, period, monthly period. The blood that comes from a woman's body at set times for a set purpose, which we all know. When a woman does not become pregnant and the body then releases that which would have been a means of nourishment and protection for the fetus, the child in her womb, etc., which is well known in the study of the anatomy. So in Islam, there are a set of rules and regulations for menstruation, do's and don'ts, things that must be done, things that must be avoided, things that should be done, and things which shouldn't be done. Even though they're not necessarily haram, they're not necessarily mandatory, but preferable things and disliked things, mandatory things, incumbent things that are obligatory, and things which are totally and absolutely prohibited, illegal. Islam has given a great deal of importance to the family structure. It has given status and respect, nobility and honor to women, and the concept of childbirth, the concept of purity and purification, the concept of morality and immorality. Islam has placed a heavy deal of emphasis on all of these concepts and aspects, and that is why we have a set of regulations for al-hayd, menstruation. When the different societies lived on two sides of extreme, those who totally avoided their wives when they menstruated, didn't sleep with them in the same house, didn't eat with them, did not allow them to cook, totally cut them off. And then we had those who didn't find any problem with the blood of menstruation, and that it was normal and nothing. It wasn't dirty, it wasn't unclean. Have vaginal sex with your wife, it doesn't matter. These are both extreme views, and Islam came striking the perfect balance, dead smack in the middle. Even to this day, we have many different cultures, religions, and faiths that still have these different extreme practices and lack of balance with regards to a menstruation or the menstruation of a woman. A couple months ago, I read an article online. It was a National Geographic article with regards to a remote village in India and how it's from the practice and the aqidah of these people that when a woman menstruates, she has to totally seclude herself from the entire village. Not like some of the Jews or some of the Rastafarians who would say that just stay in a different part of the house, or you can stay in my house but you can't go near the kitchen. But no, she has to leave the village itself and go far to a remote, extremely rural village and basically stay in a hut, a small, tiny box, and sit there until she's finished her menstruation and until she becomes pure and clean. The article mentioned that on the way to this cut off and isolated location, there will be all types of venomous snakes and murderous insects and all types of things that she would have to go through just to get to this place until she finishes her 6 days, her 7 days, etc. So just look at the beauty of Islam, the simplicity of Islam, and the clarity of Islam, how clear, how easy, how simple things are. Khairan, inshallah ta'ala. So with that being said, we always try to make a connection between the technicalities of fiqh, the technicalities of hadith, and also the spirituality of the deen and the humanity of the religion. And that is practical, comprehensive, thorough religion for all aspects of life. There is no sphere of life, there is no chamber, quote unquote, that Islam does not give an instruction on. And from that is that of menstruation. The first subchapter, the author, he says, باب مباشرة الحائض فوق الإزار. Now, before we go into the actual subchapter, one may say, why is the Book of Menses a separate book? Why isn't it part of Kitab al-Tahara? Isn't it pertaining to Tahara? So that's a very good question. From another aspect, one could put the ahadith of menses in the chapter of Salah, fi Kitab al-Salah, because they're rulings that pertain to prayer, not making the prayer. Does she have to make up the prayer? Just like they're rulings that pertain to Tahara, ghusl, reading the Quran, touching the Mus'haf al-Sharif, entering the masjid, sitting in the masjid. One can put the hadith of Hayd in the book of Hajj with regards to not making tawaf. A menstruating woman getting into the state of ihram, putting on the clothes of that. For one reason or another, this is how the author put the book together. And we mentioned a few reasons behind some of the different inconsistencies or inappropriate arrangements of the book with regards to the chapter headings and the numbering and the system coming from Sahih Muslim, why in the book is only mentioned Sahih Bukhari, not Sahih Muslim as well when it was translated, etc. Many different reasons behind this. What's important is that this is how the book is. So the first subchapter states, Babu Mubasharat al-Hayd Fawq al-Izar. The ruling on touching a mincing woman, lying with a mincing woman, cuddling, quote unquote, caressing, fondling a mincing woman above the azar, from that which is above the izar, meaning the rulings, the permissibility or impermissibility for a man to intimately touch his menstruating wife and to seek pleasure and enjoyment from her, not with vaginal sexual intercourse, not in the actual place of menstruation. However, he says, فوق الإزار, above the izar, the waist sheet, above the waist sheet. In other words, the rest of her body. If a man wishes to kiss a menstruating woman, if he wishes to touch her hands, her arms, her hair, her neck, her back, her legs, her feet, etc. But the actual place of the blood has to be فوق الإزار, above the izar. That's what's meant here. In other words, showing that when a woman menstruates, it does not mean that she's totally and 100% off limits and the person has to be far away from her. The author, he then says, Hadith 168 and 169, حديث عائشة قالت كانت إحدانا إذا كانت حائضا فأراد رسول الله صلى الله عليه وسلم أن يباشرها أمرها أن تتزر فوق أو في فور حيضتها ثم يباشرها. قالت وأيكم يملك إربه كما كان النبي صلى الله عليه وسلم يملك إربه. حديث ميمونة قالت كان رسول الله صلى الله عليه وسلم إذا أراد أن يباشر امرأة من نسائه أمرها فاتزرت وهي حائض. Hadith 168 says, reported by Aisha radiallahu anha, that whenever one of us was menstruating, one of the Prophet's wives was menstruating, and the Messenger of Allah sallallahu wanted something from her, he would tell her to place on an izar. As soon as the mince came, she would place on the izar, and then he would touch her. Aisha radiallahu anha, she said, and which one of you can control himself like the Messenger of Allah sallallahu alaihi wasallam? Hadith 169 is reported by Maymuna radiallahu anha. The Messenger of Allah sallallahu alaihi wasallam would tell one of his wives to place on an izar whenever he wanted to touch and to caress one of them. 168, 169 both prove one thing: the permissibility of having intimate contact with a menstruating woman as long as it is not in the vagina. The permissibility of having intimate contact with one's wife who's menstruating as long as it isn't vaginal sexual intercourse. And the mincing woman should place on an izar, put on something in which the blood, in which the husband is not coming in direct contact with the place from which the blood comes. That is the main fiqh ruling from 168 and 169. That's the main fiqh ruling. as far as the side fawaid of the hadith, and first and foremost, we see the diligence of the women in reporting the sunnah of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. We see the diligence of these females passing on and narrating Muhammad's lifestyle, what he did and what he didn't do, in all aspects of the religion, even in concepts of sexuality. So this shows us of the widespread dilemma today among the Muslims is that scholarship is only for men. Scholarship is only for men. Scholarship is only for males. That's it. Women should just stay in the house, cook and clean, make children, and the men will seek the knowledge and teach the knowledge, and that's it. Don't teach women anything. Don't let them learn anything. This is the mindset of many, many Muslims today in many countries. And it's not just in the Middle East. It's not just in Yemen, or it's not just in Saudi. It's not just in Somalia. It's not just in Uganda. But many people who come from these countries and they migrate to the US or to Canada or to the UK, they bring their ignorance with them. And they come with their cultural ideals, which are rejected Islamically and rejected in the modern 2017 nominal secular world that we live in. And that's unfortunate. It's unfortunate. As the Arabs, they say in poetry, the person brings bad dates and a bad scale. The dates are poor and the scale is poor. So they bring concepts and ideas that don't make no sense. And don't make no sense. Islamically, they're rejected. And even in the world today, in the Canadian culture and tradition, it is rejected. So the Muslims oftentimes become stuck on stupid. There's nowhere to go. We can't have a deen to practice properly, nor can we catch up with the rest of the world and the modern technology, science, medicine, exploration, military, political organization. There's nothing, just my country, my tradition. And the person is not living in Yemen anymore, is not living in Somalia anymore, a person is not living in Uganda anymore, but they still want to hold fast and stick to those principles and ideals which have held them back and will continue to hold them back. A person comes to the United States, comes to Canada, and sees all of the amazing, breathtaking skyscrapers and the organization, the technology, the products, everything, the sports is like, whoa. But they still can't see some of the basic reasons what made this country so powerful, what made this country so wealthy, so affluent, which made this country so diverse, what allowed this country to even allow you to come and live and migrate. And it's just unfortunate reality that many of us face today as Muslims. So therefore, the concept of women teaching Islam, the women calling to Islam, women learning the deen is clearly supported. Unfortunately, many Muslims today, when they read these different hadiths, they say, well, those were the wives of the Prophet. They were different. There is no Aishas and Maymunas today. And the same applies with regards to racism in Islam, with regards to tribalism and colorism, and with regards to prejudice. It's just one Bilal. That was the black person that the Prophet ﷺ accepted. As far as us today, we don't have to accept any black Muslims, be around them. Our daughters want to marry them, but we say no. He's a black Muslim, a black American, he's the descendant of a slave. That's it. Some of them may say things worse than that. They're not really Muslims, they're not true believers, so on and so forth. It's unfortunate that the people, they read these things, they hear these things, and they just think it's some ancient tradition. It's some storybook. It's some ancient folklore fable. It's an ancient, hadith, the Prophet's wives were scholars. Oh, alhamdulillah. And next, back to my ignorant culture, women cannot teach the Quran, period. The Prophet ﷺ, he strove to break the different cultural barriers and the different barriers of race and color. The Prophet ﷺ united the Ansar. He united the Muhajirin, the Aus and the Khazraj. He had people that were with him that were slaves, people that were nobles, people that were rich, people that were poor. And he united all of them under the banner of Islam. And they all fought with him. They say, oh, that's nice, that's good, that's beautiful, but that was the ancient time of the Prophet. Today, we have to do something different. And oftentimes, as we just said, when you look at the reality of the secular Western countries, you see that the values that are in Islam And the Muslims fail to practice oftentimes of the values that the non-Muslims are practicing. And perhaps that's from the reasons behind their countries excelling in what they excel in. Look at racism. Are people racist in Canada, United States, UK? Of course they are. Blacks, whites, people Hispanic, Latino background, Asian background, they still have their tribalism. But in a professional setting, in the college setting, in the medical setting, in the military setting, these things are totally prohibited and illegal. You cannot discriminate against a person in the workplace. You cannot discriminate a person in this place and that place. You can't do it. It's going to be a lawsuit. It's a major scandal. And everyone is equal here. Man, woman, black, white, yellow, red. Everyone's equal. And the only thing that is looked at in this place, in this hospital, is ability. The only thing that determines someone's getting a scholarship or not getting a scholarship is their grades. That's it. Ability, intelligence, and hard work. And that's nothing else. Is that not Islam? That inna akramakum indallahi atqakum, the best of you are those who are most pious, those who are honorable in the sight of Allah, are those who have the most taqwa. The best Muslims are those who have the most taqwa, no matter what they look like. If they're pleasing to your eyes or displeasing to your eyes, if their skin is dark, their skin is light. Those are the best people, those who have taqwa of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So the Muslims oftentimes, they don't implement the teachings of Islam, and the kuffar do. And perhaps that's from the reasons why the many Muslim countries have been taken over, colonized, and the kuffar have their foots upon the Muslims' necks. La hawla wa la quwwata illa billah. Because we have allowed others to have more happiness in what Allah Azza wa Jal gave us. And the same applies with regards to women. Knowledge is for everyone, anyone who wants it, anyone who strives for it, anyone who thrives for the ilm, bismillah, they can take the ilm. And that's sad and that's unfortunate. We ask Allah Azza wa Jal to help all of the Muslims to have common sense and to either follow the deen or follow that which is sensible and reasonable from the modern things. As far as staying in the middle, a little bit of this, a little bit of that, and still being mutakhallif, still being behind and mentally retarded, then the result is going to be what we see of the Muslims, the Muslim countries, the Muslims in the United States, the Muslims in the Western countries, and we see the lack of progression because of this. The next fact we take from this hadith, or these two hadiths, is that the Prophet ﷺ was a human being. He was a normal man, and he had sexual desire. He, alayhi salatu wasalam, was like any other man. He had wives, and he had intimate relations with his wives. And it is improper for one to say the Prophet ﷺ was created from light. The Prophet ﷺ was not like a normal man. He didn't marry women because he wanted to have intercourse with them. All of his wives were married because of political reasons and religious reasons and so on and so forth. This is the thing that we hear the apologetic Muslims trying to twist and warp and bend the things that are said about the Prophet ﷺ by the Christians, by the Mormons, the missionaries, by the malicious, malevolent Jews, by the atheists, by the Orientalists, and those who came after them. And they say that the Prophet Muhammad was lustful. He was a man of lust. He was controlled by his loins. He had all of these wives. He had all of these sex slaves, quote unquote, and concubines. And the Prophet condoned the rape of sex slaves, and so on and so on and so on and so forth. The poor, weak Muslims who are oftentimes living in the countries of the non-Muslims, learning their ways, getting their academic research, their training, and imitating them and loving them, then they have to figure out something to do. We can't just get rid of all these hadiths. We can't just reject the verses in the Quran, Surah Al-Ahzab, Surah Al-Talaq. Can't get rid of it. So we have to now give it an interpretation which is modern and suitable for our kuffar masters. And that is, the Prophet only married these women. He only died with 9 wives because of politics. That's it. He wanted to join the different tribes. He wanted to stop the people from fighting. He wanted people to learn his sunnah, and he married women that were widows, and women that were old, and women that were this, and women that were that. That's it. That's the only reason why he married them. And then they try to scholastically explain this. Why are they explaining it like this? Because that's the reality? That Muhammad only married those women for political reasons? Or are they doing this to please the kuffar that are attacking Muhammad and saying these evil things about him? If that's the actual fact that Muhammad did marry these women for these reasons, and he only married women, they were not young, pleasing women to him. They were women that were old, that were widows, that lost their husbands in wars. He helped out the orphans. He helped out the widows. If that's the reality, and you're not trying to twist and bend it and warp it for the kuffar, alhamdulillah. But if you are afraid of the kuffar, and if you are trying to please them and trying to be acceptable and trying to be modern like them and progressive, quote unquote, like them, then that's a huge problem. When you come across hadiths like this, the hadith says, إِذَا أَرَادَ أَن يُبَاشِرَ. It says, فَأَرَادَ رَسُولُ اللَّهِ صَلَّى اللَّهُ عَلَيْهِ وَسَلَّمَ أَن يُبَاشِرَ. When he wanted to touch them and sit with them and caress them, that is not political. That's not because she was a widow and she was a poor old woman. No. The Prophet had desires from these wives. So, from the reasons why the Prophet married so many women was the political connections. There's no doubt about that. And the women, many of them were widows and were older. And so on and so forth of the wisdom. The women know about his sunnah and passing on his hadith. There's no doubt. But that is not the only reason. The Prophet Muhammad ﷺ was so pious, so righteous, so wise, so learned. And at the same time, he was still a human being. He was still a man. And he had that which men have of desire for women. That is a natural emotion of a human being, is for a man to lust for a female. Not for a man to lust for a man. And not for a female to lust for a female. So we cannot be apologetic Muslims. We cannot try to please and appease them. وَلَن تَرْضَ عَنْكَ الْيَهُودُ وَلَا النَّصَارَى حَتَّى Allah says the Jews and the Christians will never be pleased with you until you follow their millah, until you follow their way, their religion. They'll never be pleased with you, no matter what you say, no matter how you twist it. And the kuffar who know that the Muslims will never leave Islam in totality, all of them won't leave it, but we can weaken it. And we can bring a liberal Islam. We can bring a progressive, modern Islam, which is basically stonewashing or sandblasting the entire deen from all of its practical rulings and just having faith in the heart. La ilaha illallah, Muhammad Rasulullah. And that's it. And if you don't believe this, then look today. Look at the Muslims from their appearances, how they look, how they dress. Nothing about them is Islamic. Nothing. Their names. They don't want to have Islamic names, Arabic names. They don't want to be identified as a Muslim. They don't want to be identified as an Arab. They don't want to be known to be from this country and from that country. They wish to hide their true identity and their lineage. And when it's time to pray, I go in the masjid, I roll up my trousers that are beneath my pants, I make wudu and I pray. Alhamdulillah, I go back outside, get into my cab, get into my limousine, go to my business, my office, and I'm a normal person now in Manhattan. It's sad. And the kuffar, they'll be pleased with this. They'll be happy with that to an extent. Because we've stripped them of everything that's tangible and practical of his deen. His name, his clothes, his food, his drink, everything is gone. And the only thing that's left is a bit of little iman in his heart to make a salat now and then, if they even do that. That's sad, that's unfortunate. But the actual rulings, the practicalities of the deen, the identity of the deen, love and hate, wala wal bara, that is gone. Let alone what will be the case of their children. If this is the father in 2017, what will be the case of his son, who was born and raised in Canada, who was born and raised in the United States, who has a scholarship from day one, who didn't have to work here and do this meaningless job and do this and do that. He was brought up and raised in the tradition of the West. Basketball, video games, music, this one, that one, so on and so forth. What is going to be his view on Islam and practicing the deen? Moving forward. The hadith also shows us is that a mincing woman is not considered to be a najisa. She is not impure. As the Prophet ﷺ has told us, إِنَّ الْمُؤْمِنَ لَا يَنْجُسْ, that the believer is not impure. No matter what the case may be, the believer is not impure. Now, in the hadith 168, Aisha radiallahu anha, she says, وَأَيُّكُمْ يملك إربه كما كان النبي صلى الله عليه وسلم يملك إربه. She says, which one of you can control his desire like the Prophet ﷺ could control his? This part of the hadith is used to show, according to some scholars, as we're going to mention, that a man should stay away from it at all. He shouldn't even touch and go near his wife when she's menstruating, even if she has on an izar, even if it's above her waist, other parts of her body. Because Aisha said, which one of you could do what he did? In other words, if he did it like this, he had control. You don't have control like the Prophet ﷺ has control. As we have stated before, Aisha radiallahu ta'ala anha was one who was very strong-willed, and she was not afraid and not scared to voice her opinion and her view. One can say that if the Prophet ﷺ did it, then it is now permissible for us to do it, until it was proven that it was specific to the Rasul Kareem alayhi salatu wasalam. And Aisha's view and Aisha's opinion, her istinbat, with all respect, is her view and her opinion. And if Muhammad did it and it wasn't specifically mentioned that it was only for him, then the other believers can do it as well. An-Nawawi rahimahullah ta'ala, he says, regarding this issue, and the permissibility of a man seeking pleasure from his wife with regards to her body, above the izar and beneath the izar, etc. An-Nawawi rahimahullah ta'ala, he says, وأما أحكام الباب فاعلم أن مباشرة الحائض أقسام. He says, the different concepts or the practices with a menstruating woman of different types of coming in contact with her. He says, first and foremost, أحدها أن يباشرها بالجماع في الفرج فهذا حرام بإجماع المسلمين بنص القرآن العزيز والسنة الصحيحة. قال أصحابنا ولو اعتقد مسلم هل جماع الحائض في فرجها صار كافرا مرتدا، ولو فعله إنسان غير معتقد هل فإن كان ناسيا أو جاهلا بوجود الحيض أو جاهلا بتحريمه أو مكرها فلا إثم عليه ولا كفارة، وإن وطئها عامدا عالما بالحيض والتحريم مختارا فقد ارتكب معصية كبيرة، نص الشافعي على أنها كبيرة وتجب عليه التوبة، وفي وجوب الكفارة قولا للشافعي أصحهما وهو الجديد وقول مالك وأبي حنيفة وأحمد في إحدى الروايتين وجماهير السلف أنه لا كفارة عليه، ومن ذهب إليه من السلف عطاء وابن أبي مليكة والشعبي والنخعي ومكحول الزهري وأبو الزناد وربيعة وأحمد بن أبي سليمان وأيوب السختياني والسفيان الثوري والليث بن سعد رحمهم الله تعالى أجمعين. والقول الثاني وهو القديم الضعيف أنه يجب عليه الكفارة، ومروي عن ابن عباس والحسن البصري وسعيد بن جبير وقتادة والأوزاعي وإسحاق وأحمد في الرواية الثانية عنه، واختلف هؤلاء في الكفارة، فقال الحسن وسعيد عتق رقبة، وقال الباقون دينار أو نصف دينار على اختلاف منهم في الحال الذي يجب فيه الدينار ونصف الدينار، هل الدنانير أو هل الدينار في أول الدم ونصفه في آخره أو الدينار في زمن الدم ونصفه بعد انقطاعه. وتعلقوا بحديث ابن عباس المرفوع من أتى امرأة وهي حائض فليتصدق بدينار أو نصف دينار، وهو حديث ضعيف باتفاق الحفاظ، فالصواب أن لا كفارة والله أعلم. An-Nawawi, he says, the first category or the first scenario of touching a menstruating woman, mubashara, going near a menstruating woman, is for him to have sex with her, vaginal sex, in her farj. He says, and this is haram, according to all of the Muslims. It's based off of the Quran and the Sunnah. The Shafi'i scholars, they say that if a Muslim believes it's permissible to have vaginal sexual intercourse with a woman while she's menstruating, then they say this person now becomes a kafir, a murtad. They become an apostate, waliyadhu billah. They become an apostate. They're no longer Muslims for rejecting and denying that which is well known from Islam. And then just stop the tape here for a second and let's talk about Aqeedah and Tawheed and talk about the different people who have problems and issues with the graves, slaughtering for other than Allah, swearing by other than Allah, sihr, and other different acts of kufr and shirk. And you look at different wars, the philosophical wars that were fought between Imam Muhammad ibn Abdul Wahhab and his followers, and the different opponents and enemies that he had in Najd, in Turkey, in Egypt. And those who said that his da'wah is a da'wah of takfir, of making Muslims non-Muslims, it's a new madhab, so on and so forth. Obviously, we have the ignorant people today. If you go online, you'll find tons of books, articles, videos talking about Wahhabis and Wahhabism. Now, from the different points that they brought up against Muhammad ibn Abdul Wahhab and the different problems that they had with him and his followers, as the Sheikh said himself, he said, even those who believed in what I was saying was true, but they just couldn't accept one thing, and that was takfir, saying that a Muslim now becomes a non-Muslim. A Muslim is now a non-Muslim because of an act, because of a statement. And they tried to say that this was something that Ibn Abdul Wahhab had brought up and made up. And there's no such thing. Once a person's name is Mustafa, Ali, once a person's name is Abdul Majid, once a person's name is Amr, Khalas, they're Muslim forever. They say, La ilaha Muhammad Rasulullah, he made Hajj 3 times, he fasts, he gives food to the orphans, he gives sweets to the poor people of the village. You can't say he's a kafir or mushrik, even if he makes shirk, akbar. He goes to the graves and worships the grave. He slaughters for the people of the grave. Even if he does kufr akbar, you can't say that. This is one of the problems that Ibn Abdul Wahhab had with his followers, the problems they had with him and his followers. So these people, they're saying that the concept of takfir is totally void, is baseless. And it's Ibn Abdul Wahhab, he brought it up. So what do these people say? And many of them were in Egypt or Turkey or in Arabia and other parts of the world that were Shafi'is, that claimed to follow the Shafi'i madhab. What would they say if they read this speech right here? That a Nawawi is saying anyone who believes it's permissible to have vaginal sex with a menstruating woman is a kafir and a murtad. That's the madhab. The people of the Shafi'i madhab, they're saying that. What would they say then? So this isn't worship, this isn't tawaf, this isn't halif, this isn't nadar, this isn't none of these acts of ibadah which are clearly proven in the kitab. So this is just sex. And him saying that it's permissible now. What about the one who says it's permissible to make tawaf around a grave? It's permissible to slaughter for the saint, the wali in the grave. It's permissible to swear by other than Allah. And he knows what the Quran and Sunnah says about it, but he says, no, that's Wahhabism. So the point is the concept of takfir, no one can erase that from the religion. That there is takfir in the deen. And there are people that will become non-Muslims from the Muslims. That is a reality. And there is no, once a person is a Muslim, he's always a Muslim. Just like the people today, they say once a person is a non-Muslim, they'll always be a non-Muslim. Even if they take their shahada, they'll never be a true Muslim unless they're born a Muslim. Wallahi, someone said this before. So this goes to show us the tremendous ignorance of these people and how they themselves are not following and they are not studying and they don't even know what they claim to be. And that is why Shaykh al-Islam ibn Taymiyyah rahimahullah ta'ala would say, and he said once, fi munadharat al-wasatiyah, when he was debating with some of the rulers and some of the scholars who were his opponents that were fighting him philosophically, they were having this scholastic debate and they were lying against him and saying things about him. And he wrote the book for the judge that came from Wasit, came from Natan in Iraq, and he wrote the book Al-Aqid al-Wasitiyah from Asr to Maghrib. He said to many of these people, he said to the leader, he said, bring the kalam of Ahmad and Shafi'i, Malik and Abu Hanifa, bring the kalam of their students, and I'll show you what they really say. He said, فَكُلُّ مَنْ خَلَفَنِي فَأَنَا أَعْلَمُ بِمَذْهَبِهِ مِنْهُ. He says, anyone who has something to go against what I'm saying now about Allah's names and attributes, about the Quran, about the graves, about the Sahaba, about Iman, about Qadr, about the rest of the issues of Aqidah, he says, anyone who goes against me, I know his madhab more than him. I'm more of an expert in his way than he is than he's claiming to be. Allahu Akbar. Look at the knowledge of Ibn Taymiyyah rahimahullah ta'ala. And that only comes from hours and hours, days, weeks, months, and years of sacrifice, of studying, and Allah's barakah, Allah's tawfiq, and Allah's mercy upon him for him to make that statement. That you claim to be Shafi'i, you claim to be Maliki, you claim to be Hanafi, but you're really not following the true Hanafi or Shafi or Maliki way. And this is a universal principle that can be used for anyone that's going against the Kitab and the Sunnah. Don't quote Ibn Taymiyyah, don't quote Ibn Baz Albani, don't quote this one and that one. Quote their own madhab. Quote what their imams say about it. Quote what their leader says about bid'ah and about this and about that. Alhamdulillah, some years back we translated the book of Al-Iz, or Ibn Abil Iz, or the great Hanafi scholar, from the introduction of Shara Aqidah Tahawiyah, to show the people that Aqidah and the study of Aqidah and Asma' Sifat and Istiwa and Ulu and these things is not just from Saudi Arabia. It's not just from Ibn Abdul Wahhab. It's not from Ibn Taymiyyah. Okay? So he says that the one who believes that it's permissible is a kafir and a murtad. So this goes to show is that there are things that a person can do and say that will render him to be a non-Muslim. And that is why the disciple and grandson of Muhammad Abdul Wahhab, Sheikh Abdul Rahman ibn al-Hasan, the author of Fath al-Majid, he wrote his work called Al-Kalimatu Nafi'ah fi al-Mukaffirat al-Waqi'ah, or fi Bayan al-Mukaffirat al-Waqi'ah. He wrote a book called Beneficial Words regarding things which render Muslims non-Muslims. Things that will render these Muslims to non-Muslims, to show and to prove that my grandfather, my sheikh and my leader, he's not the one who just came up with this concept. And if it's proven in the Kitab and Sunnah for this to be shirk and kufr akbar, then it's shirk and kufr akbar. And if a Muslim falls into it, he's no longer a Muslim. Now, obviously, there are details, there are different ins and outs with regards to takfir al-mu'ayyan, making takfir on a specific person, but we're not here to discuss that right now. We're making the general principle, is that somebody can become a non-Muslim because of an act or statement. And every madhab that you study, you'll find Bab Ahkam al-Murtad, the ruling of those who apostate. His wife, his children, his inheritance, his wealth, and the list goes on. Okay, so it's not just a Najdi Wahhabi thing that many ignorant people who call themselves doctors and scholars falsely attached to Ibn Abdul Wahhab. Moving forward, he says, as far as if a person has vaginal sex with his wife while she's menstruating, and he was forgetful, he forgot that she was mensing, or he was ignorant that she was mensing, or he was ignorant that it didn't exist, he didn't know that it was haram, or he was forced to do it. Let's say she forced him to do it. She threw herself upon him, she forced him to have sex with her, then there is no sin on him. فَلَا إِثْمَ عَلَيْهِ, no sin on him. Nor is it a kaffara. Nor does he have to pay an expiation or make an expiation for performing this act. He says here, as far as those who have sex with a menstruating woman, he says, and they know that she's mincing, and they know that it is haram, they believe that it's haram, not like the first scenario, there's the third scenario. First is those who believe it permissible, and they know. Second is those who are ignorant, forgetful, or forced. And third is those who know that it's haram, they know that she's mincing, they believe it's impermissible, but their lust take over them. And they say, you know what, I just don't care right now, I need to have sex with her. He says, the third scenario, this person here has committed a major sin. As a Shafi'i Rahimahullah Ta'ala mentioned, he says it's a major sin. And he must do the following things. Number one, he must make tawbah, repentance. As far as him paying a kafara, does he have to make an expiation or not? Then there's different views in our Shafi'i madhab, and always says. As we've explained before, one madhab has different views. He says the most correct view is the Jadid, the new madhab of Shafi'i. We know Shafi'i had two main madhabs, the Qadim and the Jadid, with regards to Egypt and Iraq, so on and so forth. He says here, this view is also the statement of Malik. It's also the view of Abu Hanifa. And from the Salaf, from the ulama of the Salaf who had this opinion, was Ata, Ibn Abi Mulaika, Sha'bi, Naqai, Makhul, Zuhri, Abu Zinad, Rabi'a, Hamad ibn Abi Sulaiman, Ayyub al-Sakhtiyani, Sufyan al-Thawri, Layth ibn Sa'd. Allah have mercy upon them all. They took the view that there is no kafara. There's nothing that you have to pay. Only thing you have to do is make tawbah. He says the second view of Shafi'i, the old view, the qadim, which is weak, he says is that he must make a kafara as well. He must make tawbah and a kafara. He says this view that is not just enough to make tawbah was the opinion of Abdullah bin Abbas, Hassan al-Basri, Sa'id ibn Jubair, Qatada, Awza'i, Ishaq ibn Rahawayh, and it was the second riwayah of Imam Ahmad. The first view was the first riwayah. He says, and then these people, they differ on exactly what the kafara is. So before we move forward, when we're studying fiqh of the hadith, we see how there are branches. You learn the foundation and you branch off. There's the main view, then there are side views. As we said before, you have a mental chart, a chart in your head. And the sharper you are, the quicker you are, the smarter you are, the more hardworking you are, the more you read, and the more you can retain and memorize and hold in your chest and your quote-unquote, your mind palace, the more charts you have, the better of a student of knowledge you'll be. The better of a scholar you will be. The more that you can do this. So just imagine if you have 1,000 of these quote-unquote charts in your head. Menses, jihad, buying, selling, inheritance, Shafi'i, Ahmed, Ishaq, Layth ibn Sa'd, fulan, all in your head, with the proofs, with the evidences. That's a lot of knowledge that you're carrying around. So the more you read, the more you study, the more you memorize, the more you sit and you learn with your teachers, bidnai ta'ala, the better you will be. Khairan, inshallah. Moving forward. He says the people, they didn't differ on what is the exact kafara. What is the exact thing that they have to pay. Hassan al-Basri and Sa'id ibn Jubair, they said that you must free a slave. You must manumit a slave. The rest of those who have the view, they say it's not a manumission of a slave, but to give sadaqah of a dinar or half of a dinar. Obviously, talking about a dinar in the time of the Prophet, not a dinar today, and the value of Kuwait or Qatar or Iraq or Morocco or any other country that uses dinar or dirham. Okay? He says here, some of them say a dinar and others say half of a dinar. And it's based off of what makes the kafara mandatory. When is it obligatory? Or the amount. Is the dinar in the beginning of the blood, meaning when she's in the height of her menses, he has sex with her, vaginal sex with her. And the nusf dinar is at the end, when the menses is waning. Okay? Or after she stopped menstruating, but she didn't make a ghusl yet. Now, then he goes on to say, listen here carefully to the speech. He says the reason why they held this view is the hadith that the Prophet ﷺ is quoted to have said, anyone who goes to a woman and she's menstruating should have a kafara, sadaqah, to be paid, dinar or half of a dinar. Having sex with a woman while she's menstruating, pay a dinar or half of a dinar. And now he says, this hadith is da'if, according to all of the huffaz, all of the ulama of hadith, so therefore there is no kafara. And that's a very interesting speech of Nawawi. If one were to sit down and ask the question, Nawawi, how many weak hadiths are implemented and acted upon in the Shafi'i madhab? How many hadiths will you find and you read in Majmu' in this book and that book of Nawawi, and Nawawi will say the isnad is weak, isnad is not that strong, but they'll still implement it and act upon it. So don't you think that's a bit unfair? And we said this is one of the major contradictions of madhab, or the madhabs, and one of the major flaws of them is that it's inconsistent and oftentimes hypocritical. When the opponent takes a view based off a da'if hadith, they become critical and they attack the hadith. It's weak, don't use it. When they have a hadith that supports the view of their imam, they'll, it's Hasan and Mashahu and Ma'nahu Sahih. They'll say its view is correct and it's the people, the tabi'in, they implement Ish hada. This is one of the problems of madhabs, is that there's no consistency. They jump from style to style. They don't stay on one specific thing. And we're not talking about fluidity, formlessness. We're talking about opponent. Abu Hanifa uses a hadith that we consider to be weak. The hadith is useless. Shafi'i holds a hadith, or the Shafi'i scholars came after them, they hold a hadith that's weak. The meaning is good. That's unfair. and that's unscientific. It's not science-like to do that. Okay, let alone the fact that, is that true that all of the ulama of hadith declared the hadith of Abdullah ibn Abbas to be weak? Is that true? When you read the kalam of Tirmidhi and others with regarding to the action being based on this hadith or not, you'll find that Nawawi's words are not accurate. Now keep this in mind, that Nawawi was a great scholar. He was an erudite scholar, a master of knowledge. And he was from the best of the Shafi'is, not the best, but from the best of those who are far from ta'assub, from being bigots and fanatics. Yet and still, you can clearly see the full cup and the effect of the madhab upon him. What makes him and pushes him to say a terrible statement like this, that all of the ulama of hadith consider the hadith to be weak and the view is weak. Okay, so just imagine a person, a faqih, who was a big, major Shafi'i and total fanatic. Just imagine that didn't study anything from hadith. And we know that Nawawi rahimahullah was poisoned by the hadith culture. The scholars of hadith, because he was a great scholar of hadith as well, they had an effect upon him and pushing him away from that ta'assub, pushing him away from that bigotry and that fanaticism, and just clinging to the madhab and fighting everybody else. And if the hadith had an effect on him and he still made a statement like this, just imagine those who never ever took a drink from the hadith pond, how fanatical they would have been. And that's why you read the different wars, the different books, the Hanafi scholars, these scholars, they make up hadiths, they fabricate hadiths to prove their opinion. They fabricate hadiths to prove that Abu Hanifa was right. They make up hadiths. Or they'll totally turn a blind eye to a hadith that's full of problems just to support the Shafi'i view. Read the kalam of Bayhaqi. Read what Ibn Hajar said about Bayhaqi. Read what the Shafi'i ulama say about Ibn Hajar. They say that he's not even Shafi'i because he was so fair. He was so far from fanaticism. They say we don't even consider him to be a true Shafi'i. That's unfortunate. All right. We all know what happened with the people who say don't pray behind the people of different madhabs. If a Shafi'i can't pray behind a Hanbali, a Hanbali can't pray behind a Maliki. And the different mihrabs in the Masjid al-Haram, they say that's unfortunate. And obviously the kuffar are going to use these things. They're going to stretch out these small holes and make them gaping wounds to the Muslims to get the Muslims to fight and to split up. Allahul Musta'an. Nawawi then says, Al-Qism al-Thani al-Mubashara fima fawqa as-surra wa tahta al-rukbah bil-dhakari aw bil-qiblati aw bil-mu'anaqati aw al-lams aw ghayri dhalika wa halalun bi-ittifaq al-ulama. وقد نقل الشيخ أبو حامد الإسفرايني وجماعة كثيرة الإجماع على هذا. He then says here, the second scenario is to touch a menstruating woman with regards to that which is above the navel. Inshallah ta'ala, we're going to stop here. In our next class, b'idhnillahi ta'ala, if we have the time, we'll finish this discussion. And if not, then we'll move on to the other hadiths. Sufficient is that we shed light upon the issue and mention what the hadith proves, and also mention what the ulama of Islam say about the issue. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala surely knows best. Walhamdulillahi rabbil alameen.